Uh, Other than this, chronic sleep deprivation affects the ability to acquire new information. I already discussed how it affects memory. So, what is normal healthy sleep? Healthy sleep means that you fall asleep easily at somewhat similar time every night, generally between 9 p.m. to 1 a.m. Now, this time can vary from people to people. What time do you go to sleep? But it has to be constant for people. Secondly, waking up feeling refreshed. When you are sleeping and you get up in the morning, you should feel refreshed. If you are feeling tired and fatigued in the morning, that shows that your quality of sleep is not good. Similarly, you should be able to maintain your sleep for 5 to 8 hours. Daytime person should not feel sleepy. If you are having excessive daytime sleepiness, it means that the quality of sleep at night is not good. There can be some daytime napping. Naps are 15 to 30 minutes of daytime naps. Some people report that they sleep for 2 hours in the afternoon or 4 hours in the afternoon. Those are not naps. You are actually catching up on your sleep in the afternoon. Third, lastly, you should have the ability to cover up the sleep debt you have accumulated. What is sleep debt? So, for example, if we don't sleep well, if we have a family function or we have exams, we don't sleep constantly well. We sleep very little for 3 to 4 days. Fifth day, when we sleep, we will sleep a lot. We will sleep more than our usual because we have accumulated something called as a sleep debt. What are normal variations in sleep? We were discussing that 5 to 8 hours of sleep you should have. So there is some, and what time you should sleep. All these things are dependent upon our internal circadian rhythm. So there are some people who are morning larks versus some people who are night owls. This is called as a chronotype. So there are some people who are very active in the morning. So they get up early in the morning, they're very active in the morning, and as the day passes, their energy levels are depleted. On the other hand, there are some people who sleep late, who get up late, and they are more active by afternoon, and evening time they are most active. So this is called a chronotype, and this is related to it is genetic and familial. And if you are aware of your chronotype, you can work your schedule around it. Then comes long sleepers versus short sleepers. There are some people who need at least 8 to 10 hours of sleep, otherwise, they cannot function. On the other hand, there are short sleepers who need only 4 to 6 hours of sleep and they are good. Sleep in babies, we know that the sleep in babies, they sleep almost 66% of their time, whereas adults, they sleep somewhere like 33%. And their sleep is fragmented. When infants, you'll see children, their sleep is fragmented. And by the time they're 1 year or 2 year old, they go into the adult sleep pattern. But still, the duration of sleep is much more. Adolescents also, the duration of sleep needed is much more than elderly or adult people, because adolescence is also a time of brain development. So young babies up till 2 years of age are having very rapid brain development. Similarly, adolescents brains are also changing very rapidly. So these two groups will need a lot more sleep than your other age groups. Elderly, with age, the need for sleep comes down gradually. So as people, so this is a possible that as an adult, as a 35 or a 45-year-old person, you were getting 8 hours of sleep, but now as an elderly person, 65 plus, you get by with only 6 hours of sleep and it is enough for you. Then with menstrual cycle and pregnancy, also the sleep cycle changes. So as with the menstrual cycle, the sleep quality also changes with the menstrual cycle. This does not need you to intervene, but only if it is very problematic. If it is part of the premenstrual symptoms, you might need to treat this. The same thing, need for sleep. If you look at the quality of the what part of sleep is affected, your need for REM sleep decreases over time. I will discuss REM and non-REM because these are very important in understanding the sleep cycle. But the need for non-REM sleep diminishes less sharply. So your non-REM sleep does not change. What changes over with age is REM sleep. Coming to physiology of sleep, this is again very important to understand that when there is light exposure, it falls on these retinal ganglion cells, which are where the melanopsin chemical is there. This sends signal to an area of the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This is a very important area in sleep regulation. Uh, From here, the tracts go to the pineal gland, which gets inhibited. In the presence of light, the pineal gland is inhibited and melatonin is not produced. On the other hand, when there is dark, this inhibition is removed and melatonin is secreted. So when there is dark, melatonin is secreted and this chemical promotes sleep. So there are multiple ways in which our sleep is regulated. You can understand by this model. The sleep-wake cycle is regulated by circadian rhythm, which is our internal biological rhythm, the homeostat or the sleep-wake history. If you have not slept in the past 1 week properly, your body will tell you to sleep. So there is a homeostat inside your body which regulates this much you need to sleep. Then the light dark cycle. Exposure to light is a very important aspect of sleep. And lastly, the social and psychological factors. What is happening in your environment? Your mental health again will affect your ability to sleep. And overall, if you do not have good sleep, it will start affecting your brain function. So same thing again, it has been described that the homeostatic sleep drive and the circadian rhythm, they work together to give you good quality sleep. When you are sleeping, your melatonin levels are higher, and when you're awake, your melatonin levels are not, you don't have melatonin at the time you're awake. Now coming to evaluation of sleep. How do you assess that somebody has a sleep problem? So the history of sleep is very important. The medical history of the person, the social history, what life stressors are they going through, what medications they are taking, and their psychiatric history. Detailed psychiatric history is also very important. In sleep history, what time are they having difficulty in sleeping, or when are they having the sleep disturbance? Sleep schedule. Normally, what time do they sleep? Their environment, their sleep habits. Do you eat in the bed also? Do you watch TV while you're in bed and then you fall asleep? Is this the kind of habits you have? Daytime effects. How is the lack of sleep affecting your daytime functioning? And symptoms of other sleep disorders. We will discuss the other sleep disorders. All of this falls under the evaluation of sleep. Other than the history that we have taken, a very important tool to study sleep is a polysomnogram, PSG. It includes all these different techniques. So EEG to monitor the brain, EMG to monitor the muscles, EOG to monitor the eye movement, ECG to monitor the heart. Other than that, some endocrine and respiratory parameters are also assessed. All these things are assessed during a sleep study or during a polysomnogram. And this is what it looks like. So there will be electrodes monitoring brain activity, nasal cannula looking at the airflow and breathing pattern, microphones if there is any snoring, belts for monitoring the breathing, for muscle movement and for eye movement. This is what the report would look like. How much time are you spending in each sleep cycle, N1, N2, N3, REM sleep and wakefulness while you are sleeping through the night? Here are the timings given. Then this is the recording of the EEG and other machines that have been attached. Now coming to the sleep stages. I have been talking about REM, non-REM, sleep stages, N1, N2. What is all this? So our sleep has basically been divided into non-rapid eye movement and rapid eye movement sleep. As the name suggests, during non-rapid eye movement sleep, our eye movements are not happening. On the other hand, while you are sleeping, in between your sleep cycle, there are phases where your eyes are moving rapidly, but you are comfortably asleep. This non-rapid eye movement sleep has been divided into N1, N2, and N3, depending upon how deeply you are sleeping. N1 is when you are falling asleep, when you are awake, but you are sleepy. That is 5%. Then this is what should be there. This is what healthy sleep looks like. N2 is 50% of the total time. Slightly deeper, you are asleep and you cannot be with light sounds, you cannot wake up. N3 is slow wave sleep. Slow wave in the EEG recording. In the brain recording, there will be slow waves. Your brain has slowed down. It is the most restorative sleep. And 20 to 25% of the time, you are in this phase. Remaining 25%, you are in rapid eye movement sleep. All these sleep stages are extremely important and they should be present in the amount that is mentioned. Sleep cycle happens in this way. So what happens is when you are awake in the night, you start falling asleep, you go to stage 1, 2, 3, 4. You are in deep sleep. So this stage 3 and stage 4 is together called as N3. This will be in deep sleep phase. Then you will go back, your level of consciousness will go up a little, and you will have REM sleep. This is the time when you remember the dreams. Otherwise, you are dreaming through the night, but then REM is the time when you remember the sleep, remember the dreams. Similarly, you will have multiple cycles of 60 to 90 minutes repeatedly like this through the sleep. And your time spent in stage 2 and stage 3 will go on increasing. And your REM will also go on increasing. And this last stages of REM. So in the early morning time, this time that is spent in REM is extremely important. If you are getting up in the morning and then you're not able to fall asleep, that is because this part of the sleep is supposed to be most restorative. Other than these, how much time is spent in each, these other things are also studied in a sleep study. Now coming to sleep disorders, now that we have seen that how do you assess sleep through sleep history, through detailed psychiatric and medical history and social history, and and polysomnograms are tools to study whether a person is getting good sleep or not. What are common sleep disorders? So sleep disorders, first of all, they are very common. They are a serious thing which needs to be addressed. Sleep disorders are highly treatable and they are highly underdiagnosed. Coming to disorders of sleep, we are going to focus today in terms of disorders of sleep. There are two things. One, you are getting less sleep. One, you are getting more sleep. More sleep is known as hypersomnolence. Less sleep is known as insomnia. And the third thing is abnormal movements during sleep. So we know that during sleep, you should be still. All your voluntary muscles should be still. But if you are having abnormal movements during sleep, they are called as sleep-related movement disorders. The fourth group rather, would be circadian rhythm disorders, which means that your sleep cycle is disturbed. You are either sleeping because of your working hours, for example, people who are working in shifts or due to jet lag, your natural body rhythm and the actual time of sleeping, they are not synced together. This can be external or exogenous, or it can be internal. You can have something called as a delayed sleep phase disorder or an advanced sleep phase disorder. Now I have told you about all these disorders. I've mentioned that there can be hypersomnolence related disorders. There can be sleep related movement disorders. There can be circadian rhythm disorders. But the most common sleep disturbance that all patients have come with is insomnia. We will be discussing insomnia in detail. Other sleep disorders, like I mentioned, would have a little more nuanced treatment, and it is beyond the scope of this presentation. So as we know, insomnia is a very common mental disorder characterized by difficulty initiating sleep, maintaining sleep, and it is also associated with daytime dysfunction. So 6 to 10% people suffer from insomnia. So 1 out of every 10 people will have a complaint of sleep. Women have more insomnia than men, and it increases with older age. Like I said, more than half of the people will experience at least a few nights of insomnia, which is not a chronic thing, which is not problematic. 1/3 people will say that insomnia, out of these will say that they have insomnia every night. This is how serious and underdiagnosed insomnia is. As I said, it increases with age. It is twice more common in women than men. And it is the most frequent health complaint after pain. So pain is a very common reason why which people go to a doctor, and sleep, I'm not able to sleep, is a very common problem. Is the second most common reason why a person goes to a doctor. Like we said, these are again some statistics. We will skip through this. What is insomnia? When will you diagnose and say, so if 2 days you don't get good sleep, it is not called insomnia. You should have this difficulty initiating, maintaining sleep or non-restorative sleep for at least 1 month. Then clinically significant problem. So because of this sleep problem, your daytime functioning and your social occupational functioning should get impaired. This should not, if you have to diagnose insomnia as a disorder, there should not be any other sleep disorder. So previously I mentioned all these other sleep disorders like related to delayed phase or jet lag or other things. Similarly, not exclusively due to another mental disorder. If a patient already has depression or anxiety or bipolar disorder or schizophrenia, you will not give them an additional diagnosis of insomnia. The sleep disturbance is part of the psychiatric disorder. And other physiological effects of substances. So if somebody is taking any chemicals that can disrupt the sleep, then again it is related to that chemical. You will not diagnose it as primary insomnia. Now, what can happen during insomnia? All three of these should be there to say that a person has insomnia. Firstly, there should be a complaint that there is difficulty initiating, maintaining, or staying asleep and there is early morning awakening. Secondly, the person has proper opportunity and circumstances for sleep. Now, for example, if you are a shift worker and you are having a lot of night duties and you're not able to get good sleep, then it is not diagnosed as insomnia. It is a situational condition. Similarly, impaired sleep and there are deficits during daytime. All three should be there to diagnose insomnia. Now, in insomnia, like I said, it can be transient insomnia, acute illness, jet lag, shift change. It can be a short-term insomnia where it can last from few days to 3 weeks when there is a major life event happening or there is a substance use issue. Chronic insomnia which is more than diagnosed when it is more than 4 weeks, can be due to a chronic physical illness, a painful condition, neuropathy, or a comorbid psychiatric illness. So we have already discussed circadian related insomnias. Another very common cause of insomnia, a medical reason for insomnia is sleep disordered breathing. There are or what is also known as obstructive sleep apnea. What happens in obstructive sleep apnea is that while sleeping, your breathing is getting disrupted because of either high weight or due to the neck musculature. The person is having repeated hypopnea and apnea episodes. They are not, because their respiratory tract is blocked, they are repeatedly having less breathing or no breathing episodes during sleep, leading to repeat. And if you're not breathing properly, your brain will immediately wake you up. So you will get up. So there will be micro arousals. You might not be aware. You might not actually get up and feel that I'm awake. Sometimes that may also happen, but most people will not be able to report these episodes of micro arousals. And this is more common in men than women. It is associated with hypertension, cardiac and pulmonary diseases. Symptom, most important prominent symptom will be snoring, repeated pauses in respiration while sleeping, and excessive daytime sleepiness. What snoring is something that the partner will inform that this person has a lot of snoring during the night. The person gasps in between the sleep, and during the day they are having excessive daytime sleepiness. The treatment is for obstructive sleep apnea would be a CPAP machine, weight loss, use of dental and mechanical devices, and their person might also be suggested surgery. So ruling out obstructive sleep apnea is extremely important if there's a person who's coming with daytime sleepiness. Similarly, another common cause of sleep disturbance can be this periodic limb movement of sleep. There are repeated leg jerking movements during sleep, and prevalence is 45% in elderly. It increases with age. There is no gender difference. And the treatment would be to avoid alcohol, caffeine, and TCA. And dopaminergic agents like levodopa, carbidopa, pergolide, pramipexole, ropinirole, and gabapentin. These are some of the common medicines that are used. These disorders I'm not discussing in detail because then they require to be evaluated and various investigations need to be done, polysomnography and other things, before we start treating them. Similarly, restless leg syndrome, again, there is a lot of creepy crawly sensation in the feet while sleeping, and it is relieved by movement. So the person will wake up at night, they will have a very dysesthesia in the legs, they will walk around, they will feel better, and they will go to sleep again. And so the treatment again for this is also related to dopaminergic agents. Chronic insomnia, when do you say a person has chronic insomnia? When 1 to 6 months. So in order to diagnose insomnia itself, at least 1 month impairment should be there. For chronic insomnia, the impairment should be from 1 to 6 months. Person should be getting less than 6.5 hours of sleep at an average. There should be at least 3 episodes per week. When I say difficulty falling asleep, it means 30 minutes. Like you have gone to bed and for 30 minutes you are trying to get sleep, but you are not getting sleep. When I say trying to get sleep, it does not mean you are watching something on your phone. That is not considered trying to get sleep. Similarly, waking up during the night for at least an hour, and in between you wake up and for 1 hour you are awake in bed. You are not able to fall asleep again. Not accounted for again by any other comorbid condition. So these numbers are very important when you have to label somebody as having chronic insomnia, because then the treatment will be accordingly. Right. So I already discussed these types of insomnia. How do you do the proper diagnosis? Like I said, the medical interview is very important. Underlying cause. Once you have the underlying cause for insomnia, then only you can treat insomnia. The sleep partner should also be present whenever it is possible. The full medication history is needed. Over the counter, naturally, what natural herbal treatment, what they are taking, and prescription medications. For other disorders also, the detailed medical history should be there, and their substance and alcohol use history should be there, including caffeine. Some of when you're taking a medical history, these are the important medical conditions that can be related to insomnia: hyperthyroidism, overactive thyroid, arthritis or any painful condition, chronic lung or kidney disease can impair sleep, cardiovascular disease, heart failure and CAD, heartburn. GERD is another very common cause related to difficulty in sleeping. So after having a heavy meal at night, when the patient is reclining completely, they will report bouts of acid reflux, and this will disturb their sleep. There will be associated gastric symptoms also. For that, the patient will have to be referred to a gastroenterologist for treatment of GERD and other and management of other comorbid conditions. Other neurological disorders can be there: epilepsy, Alzheimer's, stroke, Parkinson's. Diabetes can disrupt sleep, poorly controlled diabetes. And again, during menopause, during hot flashes, and premenstrual disorders can all be the reasons for poor sleep. Some of the common medicines that affect sleep, like I said, alcohol. So what people think is that by taking alcohol, they get sleep early. But alcohol completely destroys your sleep architecture or sleep cycle. What happens after taking alcohol is you fall asleep very easily, but then you wake up early in the morning. Because it is a chemically induced sleep. It is not a natural sleep that you get. So the quality of sleep will be very bad. And the next day you will have headaches and you will have what is also known as a hangover. Similarly, caffeine and chocolate. If you are taking caffeine and chocolate late in the night, it will it will not let you sleep, because caffeine is a stimulant, it activates you. Same thing happens with nicotine. Beta blockers are medicines that are given for blood pressure control and anxiety control. They can decrease your sleep, so they should be given during the daytime. Calcium channel blockers are used for hypertension, bronchodilators for asthma, corticosteroids, which are used for any inflammatory condition, decongestants. Some antidepressants can be very activating, so they should be given in the morning. Thyroid medication, some seizure medications, and like I said, blood pressure medication. So the timing of these medications is very important. So when you're taking a medical history, if you are on any of these medications, the timing of these medications might affect your sleep. Psychiatric disorders, like I said, almost all psychiatric disorders can have insomnia as a primary symptom. So if we look at what are the causes of insomnia, 36% psychiatric and around 15% can be psychological. So 50% of the time, insomnia is related to a mental health condition. And that is why looking for this is extremely important. If 50% of that, after this 50%, beyond this 50%, again, a small contribution is there of things like drugs and alcohol, almost 12%. Then there can be restless leg syndrome or PLMD. There, in around 10% of the people or 9% of the people, there is a misperception of insomnia, which means that they perceive that they are not getting good sleep, But when you objectively assess their sleep is actually good and it is not causing an impairment. In that case, you have to work on the belief system. And these things like sleep apnea and others, these are where a medical intervention might be needed. But if you look at it, almost 70 to 80% of the time, sleep disturbances will need a psychiatric evaluation. So how will you assess? Like we said, interview, physical exam, all these common lab investigations, liver, glucose, thyroid, iron, anemia. You have to rule out all the common medical conditions that can cause insomnia. Then psychometric assessment, you may have to rule out other psychiatric disorders like anxiety and depression. Sleep disorders, there are some specific scales to study sleep disorders like Epworth Sleepiness Scale and Insomnia Severity Index. But very important here is the sleep diary. What is a sleep diary? People can maintain, if you are somebody comes to you with a disorder, sleep disorder, and they don't have any other psychiatric comorbidity, and you're not treating and you're dealing with primary insomnia, people are asked to maintain a daily sleep diary or a sleep log. What is their bedtime? Falling asleep, after how much time do they fall asleep? Their night time, how many times they wake up during the night? How much time it takes to go back to sleep? What time do they wake up in the morning, and what time do they get out of bed, and do they take any naps in the daytime? This information they have to maintain for 2 weeks and bring to you, because this is part of proper sleep tracking. This is what the graph looks like. You will give this to the patient and they can fill this and bring for 2 weeks. Once you have got a proper sleep history, then you will start working on the treatment of insomnia. Now, insomnia treatment is done in 2 ways. One is non-drug treatment and the second one is medications. Coming to non-drug treatment, these are all the techniques that we use for non-pharmacological techniques that are used for sleep disorders. Stimulus control, cognitive therapy, sleep restriction, relaxation training, sleep hygiene, paradoxical intention, cognitive restructuring, and worry postponement. Depending upon what is causing the sleep disturbance, these cognitive behavioral techniques, all of them can be used on a client-to-client basis. I will briefly go through what each of them is basically. So what is stimulus control basically? What happens is that person has developed in stimulus control. The problem is that the person has done so many non-sleep related activities in the bed. So for example, the person is eating in the bed, the person is watching TV in the bed, they are doing their work from bed, work from home. This has happened, that everything you're doing in the bedroom. So what happens is that your brain has lost the connection between the stimulus of bed being a place to sleep. That is what you have to re-establish. So these are all the techniques that you use for stimulus. So this is what the idea behind stimulus control therapy is. The second very important thing is good sleep hygiene. This is not just for people with a sleep disorder. This we should follow. Everybody from a very young age should follow this so that they have good sleep cycle and they have good mental health. So your bedtime should be fixed and your waking up time should be fixed. You should avoid napping during the day. Alcohol, nicotine, and chocolate should be avoided before bed. Caffeine should not be taken at least 4 to 6 hours before bed. Heavy, spicy, acidic, or sugary food should be avoided before bed. Regular exercise is good, but it should not be done just before bedtime. Comfortable, the bedding should be comfortable. The bedroom should be cool, dark, and quiet. And bedroom should be only used for activities like sleep and sex and not like a workroom. Other than that, avoid, if you are not getting sleep, don't force yourself to sleep, and don't keep a clock in your room with a lighted dial where you are constantly checking what is the time and how many hours of sleep can I get now. So the same thing again, here it is repeated that one additional thing is that you should ensure that you get 30 to 30 minutes of natural sunlight in the morning, because as soon as you wake up, because that again inhibits your melatonin levels and it makes you active. And very importantly, turn off all technology devices at least 1 hour before bed. So you all know that now the phones are coming with blue light filters, but even with that, the light from your phones is going to keep your melatonin from getting released. So if you are trying to sleep and you have a constant light source in front of your eyes, TV or a screen, your melatonin will not get released and you will not be able. So you need dark and a quiet place to get good quality of sleep. You will fall asleep eventually, but the quality of sleep will not be good. Other than this, I think the same things, it is being repeated. Go to bed at the same time, get up at the same time, maintain a sleep schedule. The room should be cool and dark, and you should not have, you can use a white noise machine, a fan, or an earplugs if you have some noise in the background. Your bed should be comfortable. So you can do one thing is that if you're not getting sleep now, if not the phone, then what? So you can, don't read the phone book, but you can read a relaxing book, or you can practice, don't use anything with flashing lights. Sleep restriction. So we have discussed two treatment methods. One is stimulus control. The other one we have discussed is practicing sleep hygiene. The third way of treating insomnia would be sleep restriction. Now, sleep restriction is to be done with a professional. What it requires you to do is that you gradually cut down your sleep time in the night, but not less than 4 hours. So you restrict your sleep so that you develop sleep debt and you correct your sleep cycle. Coming to relaxation training, this is again a very important method of, so if you are having difficulty falling asleep, you can listen to a relaxation tape or soothing music. You can practice PMR, Jacobson's progressive muscle relaxation. You can try EMG feedback, meditation, imagery training, self-hypnosis, and diaphragmatic breathing. All these relaxation techniques can be used when you're trying to fall asleep in bed. Paradoxical intention treatment is basically used when the person has this thing that I am not getting good sleep. When this belief is very permanently, the fear is there that I will not get good sleep. Then the idea is to tell the person to do what they are fearing the most, which is to stay awake. And as the patient stops trying to fall asleep, the performance anxiety of trying to fall asleep, so they are worrying about worrying. So they are worrying that they will not get sleep. So you remove the worry by not telling them you have to stay awake, and then they will gradually fall asleep. These treatments, paradoxical intention and your sleep restriction, they should be done with a therapist. Coming to cognitive restructuring, this is done when a person has a lot of false beliefs and misconceptions around sleep. You have to identify the dysfunctional beliefs, challenge their truthfulness, and work and substitute that with some realistic thoughts. What can be some common misbeliefs about insomnia? So this will come up in your sleep history. When you will be evaluating their sleep history in detail, all these these thoughts will come up, and you have to work on them when you are doing therapy. Insomnia is a normal part of aging. I must have 8 hours of sleep every night. Insomnia can make me sick or cause a mental breakdown. I have had a bad day because of my insomnia. I cannot have a normal day after. So they are all true. But then it is about fixating on these ideas. And they are not absolute truth. So even if you don't get 8 hours of sleep, it is not that you cannot function the next day. We all have experienced this. We know that even with 5 hours of sleep, you are able to work the next day. If it happens over a long period of time, you will have a problem. Similarly, I cannot predict when I will sleep badly. When I have trouble getting to sleep, I should stay in bed and try harder. So these are some of the common misconceptions that are worked on in CBT. Like I said, CBT is highly efficacious. If you even much more than medicines, combination treatment and CBT are more effective. Like I said, the benefits are it is long lasting, free of medical risks, and there are no interactions with other medical treatments. The problem is that the cost, the improvement will take time. It will take several weeks. It requires time and motivation. Daytime sleepiness during sleep restriction will be there initially. There is lack of access to a trained therapist, and the therapist is not expert in doing CBT. These could be some of the problems that you may face. Combined treatment is combining the CBT that we just discussed in detail, the non-pharmacological or the CBT for insomnia. They can be combined with medication. So the medicines will provide rapid relief, and CBT will provide long-lasting relief. So if we are using medicines, what should be the principles? You should use the lowest therapeutic dose, shortest duration necessary, discontinue the medication gradually. Rebound insomnia can happen. When you stop sleep medications, if you stop them suddenly, person can have rebound insomnia. So you should stop them gradually. Use agents which are short, which are in the body for a short period of time, so that daytime person is not feeling sleepy. What are some of the common drugs that are used for sleep disturbance or insomnia? Benzodiazepines, non-benzodiazepine hypnotics, melatonin receptor agonists, antidepressants, antipsychotics, and antihistamines. These are some of the chemicals that are used for helping with sleep. Benzodiazepines like clonazepam, lorazepam, diazepam, these are all chemical names. All of them can be used for helping with sleep. So the same principles, that it should be given near the bedtime. You should not do any hazardous activity after the dose. After the medication has been taken, you should not drive. You should not use any heavy equipment. You have to be, because they affect your motor coordination also. Then the dose adjustments might be needed for any other comorbid conditions. This is also important, that should you use, instead of giving it every night, give it on an SOS basis. If you are not getting sleep, then only take this medicine. Don't take it daily. Taper the dose if when you're discontinuing, and it should not be used in pregnant patients. Avoided in pregnant patients. Benefits are, it will enhance sleep. It helps with anxiety also. Sleep medications like benzodiazepines are also used as anti-anxiety medicines, and they also are used as a muscle relaxant. The problem is, when you will discontinue, there can be a rebound on insomnia for 1 to 2 days. For 2-3 days, you may not get good sleep. So this is a very common complaint that we get in clinical practice. We start patients on something for sleep. They take it, they get good sleep. And the day they don't take it, they don't get sleep. And they become very anxious, and they don't wait for that period. So once the medications have been stopped, now that you are getting better, even if within the medicines are stopped for a few days, wait for 3 to 4 days. The sleep cycle will come back to normal. Recrudescence, again, the same symptoms come back once you stop the medication, and there can be a withdrawal. That symptoms are coming which were not, you did not have. So withdrawal of the same medicine is happening. So these are 3 different conditions, and it depends upon the history, what the person is giving. Some of the side effects can be the residual effects. Daytime or sleep inertia can be there. Person is feeling sleepy in the daytime because the night dose is because of the night sleep medication. Dizziness, headache, blurred vision, nausea, diarrhea, fatigue, and anterograde amnesia. They forget what they were doing just before they took the medicine. And somnambulism or complex sleep behaviors can also start. These are all very rare side effects, and if taken for a short period of time, they are generally not a problem. Side effects, again, they are very similar. The risk of tolerance, withdrawal, and the risk of abuse can be there. Very long-term use can lead to memory problems. But in short term, again, it is safe to use. The other group of medicine, also known as the non-benzodiazepine hypnotics, they are slightly better than the benzodiazepine hypnotics because their tolerance is not developed, and you cannot become dependent on them that easily. They have a shorter duration of action, so next day the person will not feel sleepy. I'd like to add here that when it comes to medications for sleep disorders, it is highly individualized and on a patient to patient basis. What kind of sleep disturbance the person is having, what are the comorbidities, and what medicine will work for this patient. It has to be done on a case-to-case basis. So it's possible that one sleep medicine worked for one person, it might not work for another. Then all these other side effects can be there. These are the common medicines that are the non-hypnotic medications that are used, like zolpidem, zaleflone, and S-zopiclone. So other than this, there is one more medication called Ramelteon, which is also approved. It acts on the melatonin receptors. We also get direct melatonin. So that is also a good strategy, that you promote, if the problem is falling asleep, direct melatonin medication can also be given. And similarly, Ramiltion can also be used. Other than this, some medicines which are not primarily used for sleep disorders, but they have sedation as a side effect, can also be used for sleep problems. For example, antihistaminic drugs. We all must have experienced that you take cetirizine and you get very good sleep. You feel very sleepy after that. So that is what is meant here. Sometimes antihistamines can also be used. Antidepressants like trazodone, doxepine, mirtazapine also give very good sleep. So if somebody has depression and they have very severe insomnia, something like a mirtazapine might be used for a patient like that. Similarly, antipsychotics, if a patient has psychosis, then of course these medications are given and they already improve. They all have sedation as a side effect. Some anticonvulsant medications can also be used. Coming to dietary supplements, a lot of dietary supplements are taken, for example, lavender, like melatonin, like valerian, kava. They are all considered to help in sleeping. Especially, you must have heard that lavender and chamomile are used. Coming back to what can be done in a primary healthcare setting. So if you do not have a therapist available, what can be done in a primary healthcare setting? Abbreviated behavioral therapy for 2 25-minute sessions can be done. The first initial visit, you only take you take the insomnia history, you ask them to keep a sleep log for 2 weeks, and you ask them to calculate a sleep efficiency score. How much time you're spending in bed versus how much time are you actually sleeping. Following that, whatever the sleep log is assessed, the bedtime habits are assessed, sleep education is done, the good sleep hygiene practices that I just discussed, stimulus control is taught, and all the other sleep hygiene principles are taught in the second session. After taking detailed history and sleep log on the first visit, second visit, all of this is done. Third visit, when the person will come, after practicing all of this, you will review what they have done in the first treatment session, and you will work on whatever problems they have faced in the past 2 weeks following the inputs. And then the strategy can be modified. So it is a brief way of addressing sleep disturbance in a general medical setting. So the take-home points here are that there are 2 ways of treating insomnia: medications and CBTI, and they can be used at the same time. And all treatments have their positives and negatives, and it depends upon the patient's impairment, and you have to look at what are the risks and benefits of the treatment. Immediate short-term medications can provide improvement. Intermediately, again, behavioral treatment is better, and long-term, definitely non-pharmacological methods are much better than medication. In summary, behavioral therapy is best for chronic insomnia. So I think we have discussed in much detail about insomnia and the treatment of insomnia. We have not discussed much in detail about other sleep disorders because they cannot be discussed in a setting. They have to be evaluated, and then a detailed discussion regarding them would be needed. So I think these are some important points that we have covered today.